him, and good luck on the run. And stuff, and more potential for failure.
Welcome everybody,
So
I'm
going to pass it over to
Turbodog702.
him,
This is
and,
Castlevania Lords of Shadow. I'm going to be playing the Ultimate Edition, which is available on Steam currently. Because of the bid war incentive, we have now been given the go-ahead to do full power. So the difference between New Game Plus and full power is this, which is I can gain access to a cheat, which does all upgrades. This is allowed inside of the community for full power for a number of reasons. One of the nice things about this is it'll allow me to show you guys a much larger variety of skips. Some interesting ones that are specific to full power, because they would cost way too many resources otherwise. It also makes it a lot more marathon safe, because, well, I'll talk more about the effects of it as we get into the run. But we're going to be going ahead and turning it on. And we'll start from the beginning here. Are we good for timer? No worries? Okay, it's gonna be on to go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yep, go right ahead.
So this is Castlevania Lords of Shadow. There's gonna be a lot in the first stage here to do, so I'm not gonna be able to cover all of it. We're gonna be using silver knives to kill these wargs as quickly as possible. A single silver knife will kill a Lycan in a single attack. This is an exploit using the Dark Crystal, which is a special sub-weapon inside of the game. By doing this, it is allowing us to use a Dark Crystal during this cutscene, which will do tons of damage to this warg and get it into its final phase. This is a strategy that is specific to full power because Dark Crystals are very precious and hard to come by normally in the game. But with full power, we get access to all of our sub-weapon resources, all of our magic, basically every resource that we normally have in the game on restart of a level and start of a level. So we're going to be going to the hunting path next. A little bit of an auto-scroller, but there is a couple ways to speed this up. So I'm going to intentionally fail this QTE. The QTEs in this game are a pair of rings which come into one another, and you need to hit an action button as they go into one another. I'm going to fail these two on purpose because even if I succeeded with them, then I would still get knocked off later on inside of this stage. So we're just kind of bypassing that and immediately going to the part where I get knocked off. So there's recently been some extra discoveries not too long ago, about 2 weeks, and I've tried my best to kind of scramble to implement them for this run. So we're going to see how many of them we can actually do. Wow. What a jerk. Okay. So this guy decided that he was going to be the biggest jerk in the world, but that's okay. So we can just progress on. So sub-weapons inside of this game are very different from other Castlevania games. It works on a weakness system. So for example, Lycans traditionally in folklore are weak to silver. So a single silver dagger will kill lesser Lycans and do higher damage on greater ones. This is a backwards long jump, or a backwards high jump. This is preserving your double jump in order to go backwards with it inside of the air at a higher height than normal. What that allows you to do is your speed is capped with a double jump if you go forward, but it is actually uncapped if you go backwards with it, so you will continue to accelerate. This allows us to gain a lot more control of our double jump inside of the air. It also allows us to gain high speeds to possibly go over some invisible slopes in the air as well. It'll be very, very useful later on. This is the Ultimate Shadow Super Jump. And we're off. And good, we landed in bounds. There is a chance that you end up landing out of bounds there, but that's fine. What's one of the really nice things about speedrunning this game is the checkpointing system and the fact that this is split up into levels. Because of that, it's very easy to kind of recover from any technical issues that you have inside of the game. So we're going to be running into a boss here, the Swamp Troll. But you know, we really don't want to hang out with Shrek today, so we're actually just going to high jump out of his arena that he's placed us in. you're going to start to see a pattern developing here where we're kind of a pacifist when it comes to bosses. Whenever we can avoid fighting bosses, we will. So right now, you might be thinking, this just seems like the most boasted stuff right now in the game. Like, how can you get away with this? And it's actually fairly easy for New Game Plus in the early chapters. What happens is, for New Game Plus, you keep access to all of your relics and all of your powers when you start over the game. So right now, I shouldn't have access to this double jump in a normal playthrough. But because I do, it tends to make a lot of the skips very easy to do, because it wasn't really intended that you would have double jump going into these sections of the game. Wow. So you're seeing me kind of run around with some red trails on my legs. Sprinting is the fastest normal form of movement of the game. You're seeing me jump as well. The reason for that is sprint wears off after 7 steps, and jumping tends to preserve it pretty well. It also gives me a chance to buffer the input for the next sprint. You're seeing me kind of stop sprinting periodically in this section. Sprint has a hard time dealing with small little bumps and slopes. Simple puzzle here. Basically, you need to find this password, in a way, by exploring the area. But since I already know the password, it's not that big of a deal. There is a little bit of optimization with the menuing there, but I won't bother you with the specifics. Next, we're going to be coming up to a very traditional survival horror puzzle, I would say. I guess you could call it the rings puzzle, or the clock puzzle. What it is we have 3 concentric rings, and we're trying to build a bridge to the destination in the center, and whatever ring you move, the other adjacent rings move the opposite way. So, pretty classical puzzle. In this case, we're making our way to the spirit of our wife, Marie. I'm not going to go too much into the story specifics of this game, because quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of stuff that we're going to be doing inside of this, so it's going to be a lot to cover. So we're going to be coming up to our first Titan. These are the Shadow of the Colossus ripoffs that you hear mentioned a lot of times. Basic concept of it is we need to find a way onto the Titan, and then once you find your way onto the Titan, it's a matter of getting to its weak points and hitting them. We're going to be using a Dark Crystal at the beginning of this fight. Normally the ruins that we need to break require 10 hits each in order to break them, but by using the Dark Crystal, we make it so we only need to hit each of them once. So the first thing we need to do is close in on the Titan. To my knowledge, right now, there is no way to skip the phases of the first 2 Titans. Unfortunately, any high jumps or anything don't grab onto the various things you normally grab onto on their body. It probably has to do with triggering platforms actually appearing. Optimizations for the Titan include doing this jump across that I'm doing, and just understanding how many shakes the Titan will do. So for example, on this arm, I know that the Titan will always shake twice, so I need to be ready to stay held on during that time. This is one of the kind of bigger luck places inside of the run, because when the Titan decides to shake, and what part of its body you are on when it shakes, is not consistent. For example, sometimes you can hit this ruin before he shakes there, other times you can't. In the case of the shoulder, though, it's only 1 shake, so it's not as much of a time loss as if you get into a body part where it's maybe 2 shakes. Or maybe you have to dodge a body part that is coming to attack you. That's more of an issue in New Game, though, or New Game Plus. A little bit of a platforming skip to activate his head a little bit early. And that's going to get us out of Chapter 1 quite quickly. So coming into Chapter 2, we're going to have to make our way through the Enchanted Forest. So there's a stomp mechanic that allows you to reach the ground much quicker, which you'll see me use here and there. It also forces a type of standing state. By rolling down those cliffs, we avoid invisible collision that makes us have to jump from platform to platform. So on the specifics of kind of how a lot of glitches work, it's very similar to other 3D action or character action or spectacle action games, whatever you want to call them. The basic premise of these games, such as like a God of War or Nier Automata is a more recent one, is once you can gain about 2 to 3 times either the distance or height that developers intended for you to get at a certain time, games tend to break apart. So in this case, having double jump, we are already like over halfway there for a lot of these tricks. Here we're going to be getting on top of this mausoleum. Okay, there we go. I wasn't getting the camera change there. So the camera's kind of fickle in this game, and because of that, it can be very difficult to gain a foothold of where your character is in space. So even though it looks like we are in bounds, we are actually not. I do a roll there as I'm landing. Normally when you do a jump that lands from a far distance and you're going forward, you roll the direction that you're facing. Since we're facing backwards for a backwards long jump, that would make us roll forward and thus off the cliff. But you can roll as you land on the ground to force yourself to roll a certain way, which is useful in a couple of places. So we're going to kill this spooter real quick. So combat, for the most part, is going to be relegated to the use of Ultimate Light and Ultimate Shadow. You're seeing Ultimate Light there as I'm fighting the spider. Later on, you'll be seeing Ultimate Shadow. The combat is not really the drawing point of this game and the speedrun. It's the movement, it's the sequence breaks, it's the crazy out of bounds. And hopefully you'll get to see plenty of that as I continue here. Okay, that was a bad jump to get that initial skip. So that skips a bunch of platforming in order to get to this section. So it's like about 20 seconds that I saved. These spider webs are balance beams that you normally have to go across. There is a little bit of intricacy with them. It seems easy enough to jump across them, but the thing you need to understand is that you need to enter from where the web starts and exit from where the web ends. Even though it's open space there, there's huge invisible walls that block you on all sides. So you need to respect that and deal with it accordingly. So now we're going out of bounds here to bypass the wall in the background. Normally you're intended to get a pair of rune keys, and with those rune keys you open up the door and lead on. But we don't need any keys, because our natural habitat is out of bounds in this game. And we can just kind of jump our way in from the roof. That power-up is supposed to give us access to the ability to rip through pillars and tame animals. However, we already had access to that because we are doing a New Game Plus style run. Feel free to update me on any questions inside of the chat that you may find as well, High Spirits, if you do find them. So I'm going to give this a try. This is a strategy that is part of the new ILs that I wanted to give it a couple shots here since it works for full power. We'll go one more good try, I think. Okay, so that's the start. Alright, that is the infinite jump. That is a fairly new discovery over the past couple months. It is quite difficult to do. And I have only gotten the opportunity to work on a couple of skips using it. But I figured I would show it off since you guys so generously donated to Full Power. And what that did is that bypassed an entire arena where normally I would have to fight a boar and then use it to break down a door and then do some platforming sections to get out of bounds normally here. Here we are approaching an arena from the bottom and behind it. By approaching from behind, we stop the enemies from spawning inside of it and taking this lever. This lever is the trigger to this door that we can use to progress on. So the infinite jump has a bunch of other applications for skips. Most of them we don't have to worry about too much in Full Power, but they have actually made it so that new game might be a viable category soon enough. Sure, go for it.
This ancient city occupies many layers.
Hey, can I go ahead and rate a donation here for you? Bing Chang rung in with his $80 donation for all of those resets that were totally not fake. For the resets and the puns, all $80 goes towards Swordless Mode, A Link to the Past randomizer.
So this is Waterfalls of
We're
Carto.
gonna regret picking that option. Or you giving me that incentive yesterday, I'll tell you that.
So, as weird as that seemed, this skip probably took me around 80 hours to learn how to do. And that's going to be a common reoccurring thing. I'm trying not to talk too much about it, but this game's probably the hardest game I've ever had to learn. Because even though there was some documentation on what skips were possible, there wasn't really any documentation on how to do the skips, what you were looking to accomplish with them. Whoops. There we go. So we activate the grapple point there by doing a high jump. Normally you have to go all the way around those structures, follow a side path, and kind of work backwards from there. Dang. So I tried to go for another skip there, but that one's a bit difficult to get in a single attempt. However, we do have backup strats. So normally you're intended to tame that spider and use its web ability to make a bridge for you to cross that gap. However, by crossing the invisible barrier, the web still actually does exist, it's just not visually there. We're going to bypass this arena by throwing some holy water. That allows us to get high enough to access this grapple point. So holy water is probably one of the most precious commodities inside of this run. I mentioned how Silver Dagger does a number on lichens. Holy water is very strong against a variety of enemies, including vampires. But in the air, it allows you to gain extra height and a little bit of horizontal distance as well. So this is a Carto. It is impossible to climb here, says the game. You'd better find an alternate way. Look at how impossible it is, guys. So impossible. Better find an alternate way. So that's an example of a level where the normal level takes like probably 8 minutes to clear if you're doing it kind of casually. But in the speedrun, we decimated in less than a minute. So we're doing a couple of climbing skips here. The main thing is you don't want to climb whenever you can because Gabriel's animation as he's crawling across walls is rather slow. So, like this stuff. So, the less of that you can do, the better. You're going to see us ice skate up these stairs real quick. So that's a little bit of a bug from what I had mentioned before. So normally you're supposed to get 2 rune stones here to extend a bridge across this gap. But with a little bit of know-how and the power of backwards long jump, we can get past it just fine. I'm going to be preserving my double jump by hanging off of this ledge. That's going to allow me to hopefully gain access to this thing. I missed it the first attempt. This is a rather new way to do this skip. There's another way that I normally do it. But there we go. That allows us to catch that grapple point. So we're going to get it put into an imp arena here. There's no genuine way to speed this up. I use the Dark Crystal here because there is some data to suggest that it might go a little faster if you kill all the enemies. But it does seem to be on a pretty heavy timer. This is going to bring us into another level where we're pretty heavily going to break it, which is going to be Sanctuary entrance. So Sanctuary entrance, you're intended to go all around this stage, gathering pieces of a Dark Crystal to power a mechanism and a puzzle. That would open up this door and then the final door.
Fate has played its hand, and now the die is set.
With our high jumps, though, we are able to bypass these doors and move on to the next Titan of the run. So I mentioned that a lot of these skips were documented and found before I got to them. I just kind of had to backwards engineer most of them, unfortunately. But to give a shout out to the people that have spent the most time finding stuff for this game and pushing it, Findlestick is probably the most influential person. He's well known in 3D game glitch hunting communities. Akion, who helped with the archival for this stuff and some of the other techniques. Satvara, and Vipiazone. Also, a special shout out to Lestat Vampire, who is the only other person who's done RTA runs of this game. If this looks at all interesting to you, I encourage you to look up Findlestick's channel on YouTube. He has some IL, individual level speedruns, that he's put together that are fantastic. And he just recently redid them about 2 weeks ago with the newer findings. So they are fairly up to date. And there's some really cool stuff in there. So once again, just kind of making our way across the Titan. Making our way to its weak points. Giving it the business with good old Gabbo Belmont. So falling off of a Titan, depending on where you are and how far into the fight you are, it can cost you a significant portion of time. So you really do want to err on the side of caution, especially for a marathon setting for this game. So you'll notice that I did the infinite jump, and you might be like, well, why don't you just do the infinite jump anywhere, right? Well, the thing is not only is the infinite jump prohibitively difficult to do, but it also requires a special setup. You have to set yourself in a glitched standing state, which there's a number of ways to accomplish this, but it isn't something that's completely universal. You do have to kind of find weird geometry to work off of, or get other specific triggers to occur. So some cutscenes you cannot skip. 9 times out of 10, the reason you can't skip them is there's a QTE in them, like this. Don't mess up this QTE. That'd be real bad.
Gabriel, take this.
So this game looks really good. It is a little bit unfortunate that we don't get to see some of more of the cutscenes, because I think this game does a lot of really cool stuff with its visuals and art direction in general. So we're going to fight the Black Knight, who is originally our friend, but is kind of mad for what happened in the story. just before this. We're going to break a Dark Crystal to get some initial damage on him, and then progress to use Ultimate Shadow. So Ultimate Shadow is the strongest single-hitting move in the game. However, as you can see, when I hit him, it slows down the game. And because of that, the highest DPS in the game, if you can get the enemy in the corner, is Ultimate Light, which is the spinning light attack move that we saw earlier. We turn off our magic before grappling with the Black Knight, because it is possible to get magic drops off of him when he gets out of his stun state, but in order to do so, you need to turn off your magic. So that was a pretty good Black Knight fight. We got pretty good magic drops. You really want to get 3 magic drops is like kind of an optimal thing, but 2 is totally fine. I will take 2 all the time. This is 3 towers. This is a level that is heavily broken by the fact that we're simply in New Game Plus. We use the Shadow Punch power because it charges instantly and is able to push the thing without having to charge your punch up. You also need it in order to break through that door. That creates the grapple point that we need in order to cross this. Important to take that hit there if that guy engages as fast as he did, otherwise he knocks you off the cliff and you just fall down. You have to restart. So better to take the short loss than the long one. So unfortunately we didn't get a side hop there, so we're going to get a little bit of a slower crawl here. It's okay though. We're going to be coming up to a large arena skip here. So normally inside of this arena, you're supposed to fight a ton of werewolves and then get rescued by fairies, which is how you obtain them inside of the game. The fairies then open up an enormous door in the background, but with the weapons that we have access to here in our strategies, we're able to bypass this door normally. So we're going to continue on with the level. Normally, the intent of this level is that you are supposed to run around it, gaining access to fairy fountains for 3 fairies to open up this door. Since we already have 3 fairies inside of our inventory, we can just skip the level, the rest of the level. This is our first Lord of Shadow, Cornell. So very climactic battle, but, you know, we realize that the friendship is more important than some silly mask piece. So we decide to just, you know, let him be. He can hang out there for a while, maybe cool down a little bit. And Cornell realizes that he was a real jerk, so he just gives us his boots for some reason and gives us the mask piece, and we move on the wings of an eagle. Don't worry about it. It's not important. The important part is that we peacefully resolve the situation. A lot of the time, we're really being a very peaceful person through most of this game. We're experts at stealth espionage action. Hideo Kojima, well known for assisting with the production of this game. And I mean, I'm pretty sure that this is the stealth game he always wanted to make. He just never got the opportunity to. I just did a very casual out of bounds there. That skips a climbing section. This is the Ogre skip, which is going to be also followed up by the Chupacabra skip. Ogre is a rather lengthy 3-part boss encounter. But by doing a rather clever out of bounds jump here, we can bypass it. Okay. I did not get a good jump there. Okay. So we're going to restart from checkpoint. Luckily, a checkpoint is made right here. Okay. Stomp on the ground right there. All right. This time, let's try not to fall off into the abyss. So I guess I can talk about that a little bit. You'll notice sometimes I'm taking it very slow at certain places, like there. And the reason for that is this is not just a flat barrier that's allowing me to stand on it. There is actually finite space there, and if I fall off of that, then I am constantly falling in an endless void, and I have no way of recovering at that point. So I have to restart from checkpoint. So there are times where I have to kind of gingerly move around, making sure that I'm not falling into the dark abyss. This is the Crow Witch stage. A lot of arena skips inside of this. You're supposed to meet sword masters in here. And sword masters are kind of jerks. A little bit of a platforming skip there as well. So we're going to avoid them by jumping over this gate. Normally after you defeat the sword masters, a flock of crows comes and busts this gate open. The chapter is called The Crow Witch, so I'm guessing you can understand who the boss is of this stage. So for this one, it's a little bit of a weirder skip. So for here, we need to launch high enough into the air to activate that grapple point. That grapple point is normally not visible and not activated, but if you can get high enough, you are able to do so. There is a couple of ways to do it. I used one that was a little bit quicker, potentially, but lost pretty much the time I would have saved because the Swordmasters engaged on me a little quick. It's okay, though. Still saves a ton of time over fighting them. So we preserved our double jump here to attempt to skip here as well. Which is that. That just skips about 6 or 7 seconds of platforming. Again, these all seem like minor skips, but I'm actually at a point where this is what I'm working with this game. Let's see if we can get the Omelette strat. Didn't get the Omelette. So, it is possible to throw back multiple eggs at her. If you can throw back 2 eggs, then you can force a 2-cycle fight. I would say it would have been excellent if I was able to get it in this run. But I kind of yoked it all up.
Requires great execution?
The biggest problem with getting the Omelette strat is the first time you throw back an egg at her, the game slows down. And because of that, your inputs get eaten when you're trying to grapple the other eggs. It's okay, though. 3-cycle is still pretty typical. You can't always make an omelet. Sure, go for it.
Hey, gotta throw a quick donation in there? Okay, we got a $20 donation from T Murdoch88. Much community love to RPGC.
Oh man, Dan.
$10 to complete Epistory incentive. And
that's Simon.
For Dan in
right,
SF1,
so
a
that is a picture of Simon Belmont.
Someone asked about
the reason it is there, it is not normally there in the game. That is a thing to show that the cheat menu is enabled. What is kind of nice about it is it does mimic the movements that I'm doing in the game to some extent. So another nice thing about this is because a lot of times when I'm out of bounds I can't visually see my character, I can sometimes use that to get an idea of what type of state my character is in. If he's in the air, if he's on the ground. what type of attack I'm doing, things like that. Which can be useful when you're learning the game. Now that I've played it as much as I have and kind of have a better understanding of the game at large, I don't need to use it that often. But it's still helpful sometimes. Wow, that guy just taking the hit. Alright, moving on to Chapter 5. We're going to go to Varus Woods here. So I'm going to give a skip one attempt here. This is going to be another infinite jump skip. This one's significantly more challenging to do than the other one because I get one attempt at it. Whoops. Wrong sequence there. Okay. Dang. Okay. So I was attempting to basically stop this event from happening, but it's pretty hard to happen, or pretty hard to do. And I haven't had the most time to work on it. This is a Chupacabra. I guess it's good that we get to see one of them. This is the only one we should be seeing in this run. What they do is they steal your relics, and the idea is to use puzzle platforming or small combat sections to find him and then get them back. Waiting for goblins to spawn. So we need something in order to break that gate. We're going to run into a warthog here. We're going to use the giant boar to break down this. Normally you would have seen this giant boar inside of an earlier chapter where I did the first infinite jump. But because of the way I approached it with the infinite jump, you didn't need to see it there. So I'm using fairies as a distraction. Fairies are actually way, way underestimated inside of this game. They're very, very good at dealing with enemies that are otherwise problematic. They can distract most larger enemies, such as this boar. Let's hope that we don't crash our game here, because that is something that can happen. Okay, we did not. Excellent. There's this weird thing where whenever you're dismounting boards, the game has a tendency to occasionally crash. I have no idea why this is. It doesn't occur in the PlayStation version, but sure happens in the PC version. I would say uncommonly. Not rare, but uncommonly. So we received our relics back and we can continue on with the stage. So had I gotten that infinite jump, it would have saved that whole sequence. And the infinite jump would have dropped us off here, basically. But as mentioned, it's a difficult skip, and you really only get like one attempt at it. So even though I think my time is extremely good for RTA, there is still room for growth. This is Gaul Village. This is going to be another complete skip stage. Normally you're supposed to progress forward into a graveyard where you have to do a arena filled with ghouls which come out of holes that you need to seal with your companion Zobek. But instead, we are going to kind of jump out of bounds and hit the end of level trigger. This is Abbey Catacombs. This is another one where we're going to skip a lot of arenas that the game tries to enforce on us, such as this one.
Deep below the abbey, ready to face.
So we're going to try the IL strat first.
This is not going to be so easy.
So that's the IL strat. Allows you to bypass a little bit of extra platforming and a couple of other skips. So you're basically combining all the skips into one. This is Abbey Library. I'm going to try to do a much more difficult version of this skip this time. This is actually probably my favorite level in the game, just because you get a look into kind of the game design around this game. Anybody who's familiar with game design or modeling should get a little bit of a kick out of that out of bounds. Okay, so we got the first part of the skip done. Now we need to try to get the second part. Okay, whew, that was close. So now we need to move close to this door so that we trigger that camera change. So that's a really weird skip. To kind of briefly talk about it, we are approaching that room from the opposite side, and because of that, the game hasn't fully loaded this room that I'm currently in. And as a result of that, we can approach the staircase leading up from the back side. We need to be very careful, though, with how we approach it, because if we are not, we fall off infinitely. We need to backtrack to the doorway without going through it, since it doesn't have collision on that side. That allows the next area to load behind us. So here we're going to do a slight skip. We need to get rid of these imps, so we're going to release some light fairies, which act as kind of like bombs, in a way. Once we get over the bridge, we are going to go over here and hit a checkpoint. This checkpoint is normally only supposed to be available after you clear the imps here. So because of that, by restarting from checkpoint, we despawn the imps. So as I mentioned, while this game isn't nearly as broken in New Game as it is in New Game Plus or Full Power, there's still some pretty crazy skips. And with the advent of a infinite jump, I estimate that if somebody was able to master the technique, they'd be looking at something like a 2-hour, 40-minute run, which is still considerably longer than the other categories, but it's a far way away from what would have been normally like a 5-hour run. So I've been kind of thinking about if I want to invest the time into working out a New Game run, but not really sure if that's in the cards at this time. For anybody curious, I have worked on the other two Lords of Shadow games as well. I don't find them nearly as interesting as this game. But, you know, I figured I might as well put the time into those, see if I could find anything interesting. And unfortunately, there's just not enough there. For the purposes of Lords of Shadow 2, the game's New Game Plus mode doesn't give you your relics, so your movement options are severely limited compared to what they are in this game. These are vampires. Vampires get into a throw-killable state when they are hit by a single holy water. If you hit them as they're spawning in and their blood mists, then you can kill them in a single hit, but since you don't know exactly where they're going to spawn at any given time in this fight, then it's not really viable. We're going to use Ultimate Shadow to drag Bronner into a corner. And then we're going to use Ultimate Light to kind of finish him off. I will say one of the slight casualties of this round is you get to miss some of the really, really cool, like, death sequences. Probably for the best for a PG-13 marathon, though, because some of them are kind of gory. So if someone was to ask me what are some of the challenges of getting into this game, I would say besides learning the tech itself, like the actual execution of the techniques, one of the biggest problems is, I mentioned that
Village
a lot of the time when you're out of bounds or doing a skip with Gabriel, you cannot see where you are. And because of that, you have to have an intimate knowledge of where you are in space, what's around you, where invisible walls are, and what your paths are to victory. So for example, you couldn't see that the end of level trigger was there. And you couldn't even see where it kind of started at. So because of that, I had to figure out where that was. Slight platforming skip that we don't need to do that balance beam to hit this. We are going to jump on the other side of this fence to hit a checkpoint so that if we make a mistake on this skip, we can retry faster. Little bit of a tight jump here, but we got it just fine. So we restart from checkpoint here while in air, so we get our double jump back. That allows us to double jump out of this arena that we would normally fall in. Since this is full power, I'm going to be doing a safety strat here. Normally, if you hit this switch fast enough, you can just crank it 4 times and the skeletons are a non-factor. However, I release the fairies there just for safety. Again, since we have full power for this run, I do not need to worry about rationing my resources. So we err on caution there. So, Maze Gardens. So, the first skip I'm going to do with Maze Gardens is doable with just double jump. Normally, you're supposed to break a pillar to cross over to the next side. But since we have double jump, we can literally just jump over the wall. The next thing, we are meant to get a spider. Okay, I'm just kind of stuck. You're meant to get a spider to spin a web across this gap. Ugh, come on. This statue is really not wanting us to get on it today. Okay, so we're going to restart from checkpoint since the statue broke. I'll talk about some of the problems with this statue after I actually get this skip. So that is an enormous invisible wall that we just bypassed. Normally you don't really have a way to do that. It's just way too high, but we can use the statue for a little bit of an additional height boost in order to get that. We used a similar tactic in Waterfalls of Carto earlier in the run. So what's kind of odd about that, we're going to restart from checkpoint. That's going to respawn the web bridge that the game thinks we should have. And then we're going to go ahead and tame a spider to finish off the level. But to return to that, whenever you get on top of something in kind of a glitchy way, like you saw I was kind of infinitely falling on top of the statue, if you get that type of animation on a statue, it will break pretty quickly. So the only way to keep that from happening is to basically try to get on top of it again. What I was able to do was I was able to use a special property of the stomp that I've been using periodically. The stomp and somersault will tend to put your character in a standing state when you use them. They won't always stay in a standing state for something that is useful, but in the case of that statue and Waterfalls of Carto, we are able to use the stomp to keep our statues intact and climb them appropriately. So we're going to be going into Castle Hall. So another interesting property of the fairies, I noticed that they can be good for distractions for fighting enemies. They're also just good distractions in general. Because of the amount of times that I need to crank this, it's actually impossible for me to crank this with enemies on top of me. So because of that, I use the fairies to distract the vampires so that they won't interfere with me. We're going to be doing a high jump technique here to get over this door now. Dang. Missed first attempt. Let's try second. Much better. So it's important to not only get over the wall, but get over it enough that you do not trigger the puzzle on the other side of there, which is the chessboard. Otherwise, you would have to skip that puzzle as well, which just takes time. This is Refectory. Once again, using our surroundings to gain extra height. We're going to use the lances of these knights to gain additional height to get out of bounds here. After that, we're going to hit the checkpoint trigger on the other side of this door, and then start from checkpoint to get back in bounds. This next thing is a basic puzzle. You use your magic to charge these ruins. You need to charge them in the right order in order to progress. Rather, with the right magic, I should say. Pretty soon, skeletons are going to spawn, so because of that, I am going to be using fairies to distract them. Very important that when I use the fairies, I use them with either shadow or no magic equipped. Otherwise, they will turn into bombs with the light magic. Wow, that didn't trigger, huh? Okay, we're going to do this. So we're going to restart from checkpoint. I hit... So the puzzle here is light, light, shadow, shadow, light, shadow. And I hit R1 before I triggered that ruin, but it just didn't take my button press, I guess. So we'll just do it again real quick. We'll slow ourselves down a bit, also. Okay. Jerk. There we go. And there we go. That's how that's supposed to work. It's really kind of odd. Making our way over to the balcony. So you're noticing we're making our way through a castle. This will later turn into Castlevania in later Lords of Shadow games. For now, it is the base of the second Lord of Shadow, Carmela, who's the vampire or Dark Lord. So by doing the skip on the fence coming up here, we're skipping having to find the key through a series of enemies. We are also going to skip a ball drop puzzle, for lack of a better term. I really have no other way of describing it other than it's the ball drop puzzle. If you were hoping for a better description, sorry. So once again, kind of important that I move with caution there, going around the outside. Okay, Electric Laboratory. So Electric Laboratory has Waterfalls of Carto, Gravedigger Skip, Necromancer Skip, and a previous skip that I mentioned are probably the skips that I've had the hardest time learning in backwards engineering. This one is another skip that probably took me about 60 hours to learn and actually get down and understand what was happening with it. So for a little bit of history, before backwards long jumping, this game was basically not RTA viable. They were just skips that took way too much holy water. They were way too difficult to do. Just a prohibitively difficult game to run in a real-time setting. But with backwards long jump, it's actually put the game in a state where I am able to perform and do skips consistently. Also led to a variety of new skips as well. So right now we are standing on top of a breakable wall. Now we're falling out of bounds. Very important to hug the edges of the screen here, because there is a very scant amount of space to stand on. So what I'm doing here is I'm back rolling into the electricity. That allows me to stand inside of it. That'll allow me to grab the red lens through it and take that to the end of level trigger. The end of level trigger is attached to picking up the red lens. If I didn't get into the end of level trigger as quickly as I did, I would get pulled into the boss arena that spawns as a result of that. So earlier on, we used Guillotine. This is another property of Guillotine. Guillotine can grab onto odd pieces of geometry and allow you to relaunch off of them. It's useful in a couple of stages. This allows us to bypass the door and all of the side arenas that you would normally have to do inside of this stage. So here I have landed at a place that makes it a little bit difficult to get out of, but it's still pretty good to get it in as few attempts as I did get. We're going to watch a little bit of this screen because we're going to get called out.
It's not fair. I never lose.
Oh no! It's the Twin Galaxies mods. They've come to take me away.
And you're going to pay.
So, interesting thing about the puppets,
Now,
you do need to kill them with a grab animation. If you do not, they respawn. It's the main reason we cannot use a Dark Crystal to just instantly defeat this arena. It's always nice when the game calls you a cheater. So while it could be faster to use Ultimate Light to do higher DPS on these guys, I am shying away from it because you can do much more structured damage with Ultimate Shadow. And I don't want to run into a situation where I use a ton of magic for Ultimate Shadow, but don't get these puppets in a grab state. Like, I could end up accidentally killing them. But with Ultimate Shadow, that's not a complete non-factor, but it's much less likely to happen. Let's start working the body here. So we're going to progress our way to the next chapter, which is going to be Chapter 8. At the end of Chapter 8, we're going to be fighting the Vampire Dark Lord. But for now, some more platforming skips.
Curious, isn't it?
A couple of arena skips. In this stage, we're going to get introduced to the Holy Cross Breakout. Breakout is a general term for this style of game. The idea is that you are breaking out of a pre-made animation. And I'll discuss that more when we actually get to the skip itself so you can understand what I'm talking about. For now, we need to make our way over this gate so that we do not need to solve the magic puzzle or fight the enemies inside of it. Alright. So we're going to be using some fairies in an attempt to stop these imps from hitting us. While we do that, we're going to be pulling a crank that rotates a opening in this gate. These imps are pretty notorious in my runs for being enormous jerks, so let's hope they cooperate. Looks like we got through just fine. So, this is the Holy Cross Breakout. So Holy Cross is a specific move inside of the game using light magic. By using it, I stopped Gabriel from doing an animation. Normally, he is supposed to bend over, pick up the key for the next area, kind of look at it a little bit, and as he does this, the gate closes behind him. You're then forced into an arena where you have to defeat the enemy in there and then crank the gate open. But by using a breakout, we were able to get past that. Time to ice skate up this chain real quick. Next stage is going to be a Castlevania classic. It's going to be the Clock Tower. The funny part is it's called the Clock Tower Tower, or Clockwork Tower. Which is pretty apt, I guess. So that jump that I made around the side to get on this moving platform skips the entire first floor and all of the puzzles and platforming therein. We're going to be doing something kind of similar with the second floor, but a lot less abusive. We're going to attempt to skip half the floor here. So normally there's a jump that I can do to reach the platforms that are spinning in the background there. But since we did full power, I'm going to attempt to go for a skip on the boss of this section. It is not guaranteed that I will get it. It's very heavily has to do with what the boss decides it wants to give you for a pattern. If the boss... Wow, okay. If the boss gives you a bad pattern, then there's not really anything you can do about it, and you just lose the skip. So luckily I don't need to worry about the cycles on these platforms. I originally thought you did, but if you preserve your back jump, you can just jump to that section. That's a very difficult jump to hit. I'm surprised I got it on there. So by doing a high jump here, we can activate that grappling point earlier than the game expects. So normally as I'm cranking this, Frankenstein's monster is supposed to come out and interrupt me and force me into a fight with him. I'm going to attempt to bypass him by playing a little game with him. Okay. So he used his telekinesis ability. And, okay, stopped me from getting the crank. So we're not going to be able to go for the skip. If you can finish that last little bit of the crank, you can attempt to get over an enormous invisible wall and make it to the end of level trigger. The problem is, since he used telekinesis, well, he blocked me from completing the crank, which is already something. But in addition to that, because he used his telekinesis move, there is pretty little chance that I'd be able to execute the skip, because as I would be doing my high jump to get over the invisible wall, he'd just be throwing gears at me and knocking me out of it. So, unfortunate, but not unexpected. If I'm ever on good pace for runs, I don't go for this skip. Which eventually I'll get to a point where I have to go for it in good pace runs, but it's a minor time gain of maybe like 15 seconds or something. And it's brutal if you miss it, so. Also requires a lot of resources as far as holy water in a section of the game where you're already strapped for resources. So while I might go for it in full power, I would not go for it in New Game Plus. This is Olrox. This is another skip that took me probably 40 plus hours to figure out how to do it. And a good setup for it. A lot of the difficulties with this come from the fact that Olrox can change the position of the camera without me having any say in it whatsoever. Ah. So because of that, it can be very difficult to line up your backwards jump to get over his boss door, like I was trying to do there. Ugh. Okay. He can also do a lot of attacks that make it very difficult to get on top of this chain to begin with, which is pretty frustrating. Yeah. So there he used his blade throw ability. If he does the blade throw, you're actually just screwed because it has infinite range. I have been way out of bounds, and he still hit me with it. Okay. So this skip's going to give us trouble right now, I guess, today. But we'll work it out. Even with these failures, this skip is still saving a ton of time because of how prolonged the mechanics of this fight are. So it's always worth it to go for it if you know how to do this. There we go. Okay, so I got on top of the thing. Now we need to do the second part of the skip, which is get a restand. Once I've gotten a restand, it's considerably easier to hit the end of level trigger. So that's difficult for a number of reasons. As I mentioned, getting Olrox to cooperate and not hit you is difficult. Getting Olrox to cooperate and not change the camera on you as you're trying to do the skip is difficult. There's a lot of very odd geometry that blocks your way to getting to the other side of the door. Just a very difficult skip in general, but it saves like 6.5 minutes, so you have to go for it, right? Gonna break a Dark Crystal during phase 2 to speed up this phase. Once again, this is going to be dominated by Ultimate Shadow, followed by Ultimate Light as I get her in the corner. Funny part here, she's going to spawn elemental orbs that I can get magic from, but I'm not going to be able to absorb them because there's not enough time between when I gain action and when the cutscene starts. It's kind of silly.
What's the true power of a Dark Lord?
So everybody gets to watch a nice little cutscene coming up here. Very important I don't miss the QTEs in this, because this cutscene is quite long. It's like 2 minutes. If you had anything to cover as far as upcoming runs or donation stuff, high spirits, feel free to. Oh, well.
Well, the thing is, I think you have me turned down
All right.
on your end, so they can't really hear me in chat when I talk. So you can hear me fine, but they can't.
Sure.
So I'm pretty much just letting you do your thing, and I'll fix whatever issue needs to be done at the end of this run and catch up on donations.
Never always mods. Because there's always
Oh, wait,
going to be
now
that
you guys
guy
can
that
hear me?
just
Hold on a second. You guys said you couldn't
can't
hear
hear
me
anything or...
Well, yeah, they can kind of hear me, but it's hard
I see.
to say. I mean, you'd have to turn me up in Discord on your end.
Yeah, the game kind of pauses as that happens.
I mean, you got a cutscene here, so maybe it'll work. Oh,
Sure.
Okay, then don't worry about it. I mean,
Well,
I
here's a
can
good
talk
question.
louder,
Is it
maybe
because
that'll
the
work if you
game
don't
is too
mind.
loud that they can't hear
That's
you?
your
Because
end.
I can do something about that.
Well, I think it's because my Discord on your end is turned, I'm just quiet on your end, so that's why. And because I'm capturing your audio right now, it's capturing my Discord audio from you.
Yeah, I didn't think about that at first. I probably should have signed in. Yeah, I just probably should have signed in on my phone for Discord or something.
You have it really quiet, because usually it's not an issue.
Oh well, we're in it now, so yeah. I mean, it's. Thank you for your donations.
Oh yeah, we're in it.
This
I only got a
charitable
couple of
cause.
donations. I'll read them
A
after.
pillar of the community. Shoot, yeah. So we're going to have Bones Forest here. Bones Forest is going to have another Chupacabra, as mentioned. I'm sure those puzzle platforming sections where he steals your relics. We are going to attempt to skip this one as well, just like we did with some previous ones. To that effect, we are going to be using a Dark Crystal to clear the upcoming arena. Normally I would not use a Dark Crystal for this purpose, because it's kind of wasteful. But what this allows us to do is create a checkpoint here, so that if I do fail to skip, I can try it again without any penalty about twice before it starts losing time to the normal strat. Actually, probably about 3 times. It's a really powerful strat. But it is kind of difficult. Basically, the trigger around the Chupacabra is very large, and once I get out of bounds, there's going to be slopes that, even though I'm out of bounds, the slopes will bring me into the Chupacabra cutscene. So the idea will be to use a stomp through Landslide Punch to avoid that. Okay. Alright, so we didn't get it that time. I got kind of a bad jump there to start it, though, so I'm not surprised that that one didn't work. Alright. There we go. Okay, good. So that allowed us to jump over the cutscene with the Chupacabra. We're going to preserve our double jump here so that we can bypass some climbing here as well. Saves a few seconds. Normally for that Chupacabra section, you need to fight a large cave troll and then use it to break down some barriers before getting into another encounter, where you can then find the Chupacabra and recover your gear. It takes upwards of 1:10, so very, very powerful skip if you're able to do it. Using Landslide Punch to get a restand was one of the key things for me learning that trick, and understanding that made it quite a bit easier. I still miss it from time to time, as you did see, but it's considerably easier with the strategy that I've picked up. This is Woesmore. This is probably my second favorite stage in the game, because once again, it shows you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes look at how the stage was made. So because there's floor underneath here, we're actually able to see that these kind of wisps appear underneath the stage. These are actually keys. Inside of the level proper, you're intended to fight some mini-bosses, and once you fight the mini-bosses, they spawn keys on them. But since the keys actually exist outside of the level, and there's this floor underneath it, we can conveniently just kind of pick them up. And then use a restart from checkpoint to get back inbounds. I'm going to go for a relatively new skip here, which is the Crow introduction skip. We'll see if I get it. I literally just learned it today, so We'll see how it works out. And we got it. Excellent. So normally, the game is supposed to introduce a puzzle to you. That's kind of the crux of this stage. You are intended to use the crows in order to activate them into bosses, and that's where they're introduced. It was recently discovered in the Findlestick individual level that you can skip that cutscene. This is Music Box. Music Box is a purely puzzle platforming section where you are meant to use these cylinders to access different traps. For example, the green cylinder is related to spikes. The red cylinder is related to moving platforms, which we're going to see here. So it's a little bit of a chill part of the run. I didn't get the opportunity to look at all of the runs available for the marathon. One that I'm definitely looking forward to is the couple that Dragon Dark are running. I know he's doing Final Fantasy with a character bid war, I believe, and he's doing Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plume, if I'm not mistaken. So, no Valkyrie. What was the other game he was running? Oh, just Final Fantasy 1. Oh, okay.
No,
Still a really cool run if you
no
haven't
Valkyrie.
gotten to see
He's
it,
just doing Final
especially
Fantasy
for the
1.
version of the game that he is going to be
Just
running.
Final Fantasy 1, yep.
Yeah, I was thinking about a separate marathon that's going to be coming up down the pike as well. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the handheld marathon that was this weekend.
So there are a couple things you could do to speed up this stage. For example, there is a complete level skip. It involves a lot of resources and a prohibitively difficult jump in order to do. The main problem with that isn't that I haven't necessarily learned it, but that I have been unable to confirm that it actually works on the PC version of this game. I have gotten it to work on the PlayStation 3 version, which was where it was originally worked out. I have not been able to confirm it on the PC version yet. There is one additional skip I have not been able to confirm. That is near the very end of the game, but I'll cover that as we get to it. The other way that you could potentially save time in this particular place is you don't need the red cylinder that brings up the platforms. If you make very, very structured and good jumps, you can bypass those huge chasms on your own. It is kind of easier to do on the PlayStation version, but still possible on PC. However, it doesn't save a really huge amount of time. And at this point in the run, like, there's so many things that can still kill the run that I don't want to lose it to something as silly as Music Box to save a few seconds. This is Titan's Graveyard. This is a level that has traditionally given me a lot of problems. I have worked out this stage a lot faster than some of the other difficult ones that I've mentioned, but this is still one that took me quite some time before I was able to really piece together what the keys to victory were. We're going to be trying a skip that isn't a new skip, but one that I have had difficulty replicating. Earlier today I was doing practice on it and found a couple possibilities for how it might work, so we're going to give it a couple attempts here. This is just a climbing skip that I'm going to be going for. Okay, we missed it the first attempt. Wow, please game, stop grabbing the ledge. Thank you. Alright, so we're going to do this the intended way. So, if you are able to jump down there, and by intended I mean a couple of skips, but nothing as major as this. If you do that backwards long jump in a way that you can avoid the death collision that's all around this area, you can end up down here without having to do that little bit of platforming. We're going to be doing a relatively new skip here as well. This skip allows you to not use holy water for this skip. It also lines you up better for the platform you're trying to land on. So we're going to give this a shot and see if it works. Okay. Alright, so we landed on what is actually an invisible arm. Normally the arm that I was standing on before, when you activate it, it moves. And that allows you to gain access to that area. But the arm actually does exist before the graphic is moved. Did I mention Ultimate Light is pretty weird? As it allows you to not only go over balance beams, but also over swamps. So now we are going to attempt to bypass picking up some keys that would normally move this Titan's arm. Very important that we get that camera change that just occurred. That camera change is what loads the end of level trigger. So as long as we get that, we can trudge through the swamp and make it to the end of level. Like, it looks dangerous, but it's actually not. So here we're going to fight the Silver Knight. The Silver Knight takes away our magic. But he's kind of dumb, because he doesn't take our Dark Crystal, which we can use to speed up this phase. After this phase, we'll get access to light magic. This fight is meant to express a mechanic that will be used at the end of the game, which is that if a being is charged with light magic, you can't hurt them with light magic. You have to have the opposing element. To that end, when Pan gives us back our light magic, he will charge with light magic, so we need to fight him kind of normally. If he decides to drop his light magic, though, we can then hit him with ultimate light. Right now we're just using parries in order to stop his offense. Pan's pretty easy to parry as a result. Just fisticuffing this guy. So now that we have both magic, we can safely charge him here. And even if he was charged with shadow magic when I did this, we could then switch to ultimate light without any issue. Hardest QTE of the game because it moves very fast and it moves across the screen, so it can kind of mess with your eyes. But I played this game enough that it's not an issue. Fire Cemetery. Couple of new skips I'm going to attempt as we do this stage. One of them is going to be a platforming skip that I'm going to be doing right here to try and bypass grabbing onto that side. We're also going to be doing an attempt to bypass this climbing section as well, although this one I'm a little less confident about. And that's why, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Okay, so we're going to do this the intended way. So what I was attempting to do was to either grab the right side of this canyon, which the invisible walls just kind of walled me off from, or activate this ring at the far end here, which is going to happen right here. It's something that I've worked on and I've gotten a little bit more consistent at, but sometimes the game just will not allow me to do it, as it did here. We're going to be doing another Chupacabra skip in the upcoming place. By doing that jump, we skip over the trigger that would normally be applied with that. The Chupacabra is a laser puzzle here. There is a way to bypass this puzzle door, but it takes way longer than to just solve the door itself. So we will do that. Next we have Crematory Oven, which has the Gravedigger. Gravedigger is another killer skip that took me a very long time to figure out what I needed to do.
Fueled by the very flames of hell itself.
Okay. It is possible to kill these guys before they get in the coffin. However, if they get in the coffin, then it can take a long time to kill them. So I'm just going to break my Dark Crystal here to finish them off quickly. So we're going to be attempting to do the Gravedigger skip. The key thing to know about this is that when these platforms are breaking, when I'm in my blocking state, as I am falling, the game counts me as being in a standing state. That allows me to get a relaunch off. This is still a difficult skip, and a lot of things can go wrong. You can also mistime the attack there, because there is kind of a small margin of error. So because we got checkpointed in here, I actually need to restart the level. It's another reason that this can be a pretty punishing level, is if you get that checkpoint, then you don't get to restart. I'm actually really confused why I got the checkpoint, because I fell and I died, which normally would mean that I would start at the bridge again. However, it might have been that enough of the bridge had broken that I had triggered some type of cutscene inside of there. Or maybe I moved a touch too forward on the bridge. It's another possibility, I suppose. Regardless, not too long of a level. Ooh. So, just didn't quite get the angle that I needed for my double jump there. We're gonna try again. This is another puzzle where, like, even if I take a few attempts to do it, it's much faster than the intended way. Which, even after you fight this guy, you still have to do a platforming section after him. So, we're gonna bypass that as well. Yeah, that was kind of a bad. So you want to get the backwards long jump here. You're noticing I'm rotating, so I'm kind of jumping sideways. If I do that, I don't get the ability to get that uncapped speed on the backwards jump. Much better. So I still need to be careful walking around here, because as mentioned, I can still fall off. But once I activate that grapple point, I can clip back inbounds in the wall at the top of the platforming section. So we're very quickly coming up to the end of the game. We're going to be coming into Necromancer's Abyss, which has a number of difficult skips, but we'll be finishing up pretty soon here. First skip we're going to do in Necromancer's Abyss is we are going to skip a puzzle here. The puzzle is intended to make an eclipse in the background in that ring, using the sun and the moon. We are just going to bypass that and get to the section of the stage that it opens up instead. So basic ring puzzle here. There's 4 rings here. They each correspond to a cardinal direction. Oops. So we want to punch them in the order that will guide the light to its destination along the path. Trying to be a little bit more careful than I normally would with the activation of these tiles. So there is a skip for this puzzle that leads later into the level. I haven't been able to confirm the best version of it on PC yet. I think it's possible, I just need more practice with the infinite jump. So this is pretty heavily a lot of like basic platforming, a little bit of playing with distance and space using portals. So even though this is a lot of gray and brown in this stage, I actually do like this thematically because this is the realm of the Dark Lord of the Necromancers. So, I mean, it shows. Like, this place is devoid of life. Like, anything that was here is no longer here, and no remnant of it really remains, other than decaying husks. So I think it's very thematically appropriate. Like, well, a lot of criticisms I think can be levied at this particular series of games as a whole. I think its art direction is quite strong in many places. So we're going to be going for the Necromancer skip. The Necromancer skip is quite difficult and is somewhat out of my control, but I'll get to that later on. Right now I got to try to focus to get this skip. I'm gonna wait to see if he summons zombies. Yeah, he is not going to cooperate. Shoot. So I'm currently out of bounds here and I can't do anything about it, so I gotta go ahead and restart. I want to land inside of that room rather than out of bounds on the outside. If I end up on the outside, I have no way of getting inbounds. So all right, good. We landed inbounds. So that's kind of dangerous because the Necromancer has an ability where he summons zombies. The first time he summons zombies like this, it locks your inputs. So even if I'm in free fall in midair trying to do my precise jump with precise movement, it then gets rid of my inputs. It is infuriating when you're on PB pace trying to get this skip and he just will not let you because he keeps summoning zombies at a bad time. So I still need to execute this skip one more time, but with a different goal. The first goal was to activate the portal on the opposite side of this. Now the goal is to get to where that portal is, which is just on the other side of this. And that is the Necromancer skip. The hardest part about that skip is that first part. Because it took me a very long time to understand where in space, like where in the stage, that platform is located. It's kind of located... If you're facing head-on with the gate, it's located below and slightly to the left of it. And the room is kind of oddly shaped as well for any type of real jump. It's something that, even though I can visualize where that place is, it doesn't necessarily mean that I will hit it all the time. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying this run, though. Something that I've spent quite a bit of time learning. If you're not a big fan of out of bounds and glitching, this is probably maybe not something you're super interested in. But I remember the first time that I saw the glitch speedrun for this that Fiddlestick put out, his original ILs, I was like, this is something that I want to pursue doing because, like, I think this is a fantastic speed game. I think it has a lot of the best things that I like. You know, a lot of movement tech, lots of glitches and a variety of them. Interesting approaches and sequence breaks. Just in general, a very strong run. As I mentioned, I think it's visually appealing, but decent music. I kind of like my music in my games to maybe be a little bit more catchy, but I'll go with a symphonic arrangement. I could use a preserved double jump to skip a little bit of platforming here, but it's been rather inconsistent in my testing if it works or not. So I'm going to opt against it in a marathon setting, of course. I mean, consistency is king in the game where everything is inconsistent, right? Like, I can guarantee you, if No Worries had to run DQ8 and he got metal slimes every other encounter, he'd be pretty happy about that. Even if it wasn't every encounter, if he got it every other one. Alright, so we're coming up to the last major skip of the game, which is going to be the Draco Lich skip. Draco Lich is the third Titan of the game, it's the last Titan of the game. You are intended to jump on top of the Draco Lich and scale all over its body, breaking the ruins on it, before making it crash into the ground into the final phase. Using the Draco Lich skip, we are going to be attempting to skip to the final phase.
So dark, so beautiful.
Oof, that was close. So I almost got a really, really good Shadow Charge there. Shadow Charge can push you an enormous distance off of ledges, which is its main power. So I tried to go for the backup strat there, and I just didn't have quite enough space from the Shadow Charge. The Shadow Charge gives you more or less distance off of the cliff based on how close you are to the ledge of something. As you might imagine, when you cannot see the ledge on an invisible platform, it makes it kind of difficult to judge where you are and how far you're going to go. However, that backup that I did there usually gets me enough distance. I just got an exceptionally poor Shadow Charge, I suppose. This one's not looking any better. So this is like a 6.5 to 7 minute fight, even when you know what you're doing. So, once again, still entirely worth it to do this skip. I'm restarting kind of aggressively here. It is possible to get 2 attempts to get on top of this invisible wall, but what I was finding in realistic testing is if you don't get it on the first one, the camera and the position of the Draco Lich's collision box tend to cause problems when you do the Shadow Charge. Dang. So what's happening there is when I'm deactivating my shadow magic, I'm getting a glitched stand state, which is causing problems with my setup for the backup. That's just... honestly, that's my fault. I should be deactivating it earlier, but it's just giving me problems. This in general is being really finicky right now. Before I started upstream, I was having difficulty getting my double jumps to come out of high jumps. This should work. There we go. So now we're at the final phase of the fight. Even though the Draco Lich's life bar is enormous, it's actually almost dead. I'm breaking the Dark Crystal here to speed this up a little bit. By breaking the Dark Crystal, I only need to punch this around once. Otherwise, I would need to do 2 phases of getting in his mouth and punching him. So we're coming into the last fight here. We're going to have a couple phases before time is called, and it's going to be on a QTE thing, so I'll be able to give you a little bit of warning. So we are actually fighting Satan here. I'm not kidding. Giving the fisticuffs to Beelzebub.
Is that the power of God?
Imagine fist fighting Satan in your game. This is basically what Dragon Ball Z always aspired to. So the other skip that I haven't been able to confirm on PC is that you are able to use a Dark Crystal to skip the cutscenes inside of this fight, which would save quite a bit of time. I've confirmed it on my copy of PlayStation, but I have not confirmed it on PC. And if it is possible on PC, it might be prohibitively difficult. The higher frame rate might make it not really practical. Alright. That was a really good pattern on those rings. So we're going to have time coming up here. So, good old Gabbo is going to kick Satan out of the ground, and then there's going to be one more QTE after that. And... time. That's pretty good. I will take that.
141.
Oh man. Oof.
Hey,
I'll have to
we did
think
get
about that.
$10 donation for you to put towards.
What do we got? What do we got kind of coming down the pike? I know we have Final Fantasy, and Final Fantasy VII, but what else we got?
Well, today we still need to fill out the F-Zero and Escape Goat 2 incentive. Tomorrow we got Yono and the
What do we got
Celestial
for? What's the
Elephant.
F-Zero incentive?
After that, Tal Concierto, East Origin.
Ooh.
It says Nits Guy memes, which I'm guessing is Vanny going to be making fun of Nits for a couple minutes.
He says
something
it's
about
good.
him not knowing how to work Discord or something. He says it's good.
In the spirit of community
That's why
cross-pollination, I guess I'll put towards that. Question mark?
Okay. Exactly. Question mark.
So I mean, if there is, it's all right. So if there is any like odd people out there that think that this is something that's interesting that they would like to pursue, unfortunately, I'm kind of the only person you can talk to about it. But I am available on Twitter. If you can get a hold of me on Discord, I'm on Discords as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like, even though this game is considerably easier than it once was, it's still pretty hard. Like, you can see with even the amount of time that I put into this game, there are still times where the game will just refuse to give you what you want. But, you know, you learn to cope. You know, you learn to either not break your controllers or go broke
No. Look at all this. Why has my life been given back to me?
It is your fate. You have been given back what was wrongfully taken from you. To repent your sins. To make
Yeah, I think Gabriel looks okay, but there are some characters that are not great looking.
Wow, that
I mean,
face
you'd
on
think that they would spend a little bit more time on kind of your love interest and your main driving force in this game, but not so much in this one. She looks actually a lot better in Lords of Shadow too, which is kind of funny considering the rest of the game is considerably worse looking than this one, I think. But I mean, you only see her in like 3 scenes, so.
Your love. I am nothing.
you are a good man, Gabriel. You are as God intended.
Yeah.
Fallible, yet capable of great things.
I mean, I'm reminded of
Maybe that's why it
a
doesn't look that
Let's
good.
Play that I
You don't see
watched
every scene.
for
See before
LA
you
Noir,
the man who has regained
where they were like, it is insane how much detail is on this woman that's in this doorway that you literally are only seeing for these 10 seconds. It's like, well, I guess that's why the I guess that's why the studio closed down. Just slave driving their people to make NPCs that are completely worthless after 10 seconds.
The mask.
Tell
Hey,
that to
don't put the
Resident
budget
Evil
into it,
2.
man. There's no reason
Those
to put the budget
FMVs
into
are
a
not cheap
10-second
to
scene.
make. That 2-second FMV with the statue's chest opening with the crest piece in it in the police station, that probably cost $400 billion. Adjusted for inflation, of course. So to really touch on this, the reason he gets the mask is he thinks that it will allow him to bring his wife back to life. It does not. The true power of the mask is at least revealed to some extent to allow a person to see through God's eyes. This is an interesting kind of dichotomy because Satan puts on the mask, and despite having the vision and omniscience of God, when he looks upon Gabriel later on, he is terrified of him. So whatever he sees is so monstrous and unbelievable that even through God's eyes, he's a monster. But without God's compassion and mercy and ability for forgiveness, he cannot see that he is still worthy of redemption. So, yeah. Kind of a side note there as to a little bit of side lore that's not really super apparent your first time playing the game, I guess. That's person that I don't
Hey, at
even
least this
remember her
person
name
is
off
much
the top of my
better.
head.
That's Gabriel, right?
She's the person from Carto. She's an Agarthian. Her guardian is the Black Knight, but she's mute and a telepath and helps Gabriel out in the early game. But then Gabriel kills her, so yeah, it's it's all right. So
Okay. I know nothing about this game, so I've only played a couple
Oh, man.
Castlevanias. Although we do have 2 Castlevania games to give away.
yo, the double pack
For a
Double
$10
pack's pretty
donation,
good.
you can get into Harmony of Dissonance and Aria of
So
Sorrow combo.
we just gonna get into intermission here to get the other person set up, I guess.
Yeah, it's a double pack.
All right. Thank you for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you, High Spirits, for organizing this. Hopefully this
Yeah, I guess I'll
benefits
do that.
RPG Chick
Thank
just
you
fine.
very much.
I wish the best for her, and hopefully this will get her well on her way to recovery. Thank you, guys. We'll see you another time. Thank you for watching.
So yeah, thank you Turbodog702 for Castlevania Lords of Shadow.